Brooklyn Independent Television.
Hello and welcome to Brooklyn Elected Officials. I'm your host, District Attorney Charles Hynes, and today I'm joined by Michael Vecchione, who's the Chief of the Rackets Division. Mike, thanks for being here today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Why don't we start with your educational background? Where did you go to college and law school, and when did you graduate from law school?
Well, Brooklyn boy all the way. I went to St. John's University when they were in downtown Brooklyn.
Right. On Skidmore Street.
Yes, absolutely, and I loved it. It was an interesting campus.
Yeah.
The
Quonset huts.
Quonset huts,
right.
and this big building, which is now turned into an apartment building.
That's right.
We had a gym on the roof. It was, was a rather unique place to go to school.
And did they move to Queens while you were in school?
They were in Queens while I was in school. They moved to Staten Island after
really?
I graduated. Yes,
Okay.
the year after I graduated, the campus closed, and they moved out to the Staten Island campus.
So what division of the university did you attend?
The University College, the liberal arts school.
UC?
Yes.
Okay. And UC didn't move to Queens?
It was in Queens already, and a branch of it then moved to Staten Island.
I see. And what year did you graduate from St. John's?
I graduated in 1970 from St. John's.
Law school?
Law school right after that. I went to Hofstra University Law School. I was in the first class of the law school, which is now
the first?
Yes, over 40 years ago now. The first class, and we started out with 80 students. Wound up graduating about 65 students, and
what brought you to Hofstra?
Actually, a family friend knew the associate dean and kind of directed me there. I was going to go to St. John's, and he talked me into going. He said it was a unique experience. It'd be a small class. You'd get much more attention, and I went out and visited the school, and it's much different now. I actually teach out there now, and it's very, very expanded. But when I started, there were 2 classrooms in the entire school, and it was a great experience. I'm glad I did it.
And when did you graduate?
I graduated in 1973.
And where was your first law school job at a law school?
Right with the Brooklyn District Attorney.
You were hired by Eugene Gold?
I was.
Okay.
I was.
In 74?
And I started in August of 73.
73.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And that was the okay. And what was your first assignment?
I was assigned to something which is no longer in our office called the Complaint Bureau. It's now the District Attorney's Action Center, but we had assistant district attorneys manning that, and we did many investigations. I was there only for about a month or 2, and then went to the criminal court, where I spent about a year in the criminal court.
And from there? From
there to the Supreme Court for a very short period of time, and then now deceased Ronnie Aiello took me upstairs to the Homicide Bureau, and I spent most of the rest of my time in the Homicide Bureau.
Did you have any grand jury experience before you went to
the
Supreme Court?
Yes, I'm sorry you reminded me of that. I did have grand jury experience. I went from the criminal court to the grand jury and then to the Supreme Court Bureau.
And how many cases did you try while you were in the Supreme Court?
In the Supreme Court, I only tried, believe it or not, 1 case, and then went to the Homicide Bureau where I tried almost 100 cases.
Really?
So
How long were you in homicide?
I was there for almost 5 years in homicide.
And what was the next step?
I was promoted to the deputy chief of the Sex Crimes Bureau, but then left the office to go over to work for Commissioner McGuire in the police department. I took over the Department Advocate's office, which is their internal prosecutor's office.
And how long did you work there?
I was there for 2 years.
Okay.
And then after that, private practice for 10 years.
For 10 years?
Yes. And then
typically criminal law stuff?
Typically criminal law, a lot of internal, the internal mechanisms of the city agencies where they do disciplinary work. I did that. A lot of police department disciplinary work because I was experienced in that, having run the office for 2 years. And some civil work.
And at that point, did you return to the DA's office?
I did. I was recruited by Mike Gentile and Al Teichman to come back.
And what year was that?
That was 1992.
And where did you go when you came back to the Brooklyn DA's office?
I started as, actually, you promoted me before I even stepped into the office. I was earmarked for the trial zones, but when I was actually hired, I was named deputy chief of the Homicide Bureau at the time, and then moved.
Did you try cases as well while you were deputy chief?
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Okay.
I started several cases before, then promoted to chief of what was then a trial cadre. You promoted me to that, and I continued to try cases. And then in
The trial cadre typically tried some of the more important felony cases in Brooklyn.
In addition to the murder cases.
Right.
And then in 1995, you promoted me to chief of trials, and I took over the trial operations of the office, and stayed there until 2001, when you promoted me to the head of the Rackets division. So,
now the Rackets division at the time was really not a division; it was a bureau, right?
Yes.
And it was how many units were within that bureau?
There was the organized crime unit. There was an arson and white collar crime unit, and that was basically it at that time when I first took over. And an economic crimes unit, but that was kind of had been morphed into the arson and white collar crime unit.
And at what point under your stewardship in Rackets did it expand enough to be considered a division within the office?
Well, we took over what was then the Civil Rights Bureau, and it became the Police Integrity and Civil Rights Bureau. We also then expanded the Organized Crime Bureau, and it became now an organized crime unit within the division. We then moved on to the Economic Crimes Unit, and arson and white collar crimes were kind of coalesced together and became a unit. We never really had a name for it. We just used to call it the White Collar Crimes Unit. And then we expanded even further. Mortgage Fraud Unit, Sex Trafficking Unit.
No, the Mortgage Fraud Unit, was that funded by, with the help, rather, of Senator Chuck Schumer?
It was. It was. It was the need for a specific unit to deal with the exploding mortgage fraud problem in Brooklyn presented itself, and we approached Senator Schumer obviously with your help, and asked for to help get some help from the federal government in terms of a grant, and he did get us one.
And what year was that?
That was, we're in 2012. That was 5 years ago. So it's 2007.
And what is a ballpark figure of the number of prosecutions that have been generated by that unit?
Hundreds.
Hundreds. Okay.
Absolutely. In terms of investigations and prosecutions, yes.
And that unit remains very, very active.
Yes, it does.
Good.
Yes, it does.
How many assistant DAs are in that unit?
Now we have 5 assistant DAs in it.
And plus a unit chief?
The unit chief, I count him in the 5, so yes.
Right. And what else typically does the Rackets Division do?
Well, we still do the traditional organized crime investigations. We do and now we've exploded. I shouldn't say we've exploded. The problem of sex trafficking has exploded in Brooklyn and in the city and in the country, quite frankly. And now the sex trafficking unit deals with those kinds of prosecutions as well.
Why don't you walk us through, because I think a lot of people are interested in sex trafficking.
Yes.
When did you first become aware that that was a problem for Brooklyn, and how were you able to develop a response to it? Did you create a unit? Who's been put in charge?
Yes.
Just the background.
We recognized that there was a need, once again, for a dedicated group of assistant district attorneys to deal with this problem. The state law changed in 2007 and made a crime out of sex trafficking. Prior to that, we were operating with just simply the promoting prostitution type of thing, and typically it's the pimps who were running prostitutes would be the only charge that we had was this promoting prostitution, which was a low-level felony. The legislature passed the sex trafficking law and now made it a high-level felony, a B felony actually, for a pimp to force someone into prostitution or keep them in prostitution. That becomes now a very high-level felony. And we started to see that there were more and more cases that were coming about as a result of this new law. And I approached you and asked if we could dedicate a group of assistant district attorneys to start a unit so that we would have a response to the police department's vice unit who would have a need for a particular group of assistant DAs to deal with.
Was there one particular case that really kicked off the sex crimes or sex trafficking unit?
In fact, there was. It was a group of individuals who called themselves the Horse Gang. It was a very crude name. They had a stable of women who they were forcing into prostitution, and we began an investigation into that Horse Gang, and that is the case that we kind of kicked off the unit with.
You have a great deal of difficulty getting victims of sex trafficking to come forward? How are we able to get cooperation of those victims?
By having a group of very dedicated assistant district attorneys who are very good at talking to people, cajoling people, promising them the services that we now provide, clothing, social services. You know, your victim services unit in the office has been tremendous. They have dedicated specific social workers to help these ladies, and that is what has gotten us to, the proof of the pudding is in the tasting, and when you show someone that you deliver on a promise, they then come back and give you what you're looking for.
As a result of that case, did anything particularly dramatic happen to help you to publicize the existence of the unit?
Yes. As a result of that case, Channel 5 News, Lisa Evers did a very large story when we were doing a press conference about it. And part of the MO of this particular group was to tattoo and to brand almost the women who were in their group. She did that story. We did a very big press conference, and it caught the attention of two ladies who run an advertising and PR firm in New York, Joanna Patton and Lotus.
Right.
Yes, Judy Lotus and Joanna Patton.
Right, that's LNP.
Yes.
Okay.
And that group, they contacted me and asked if they could come in because they had some ideas as to how we could get our message out. And I met with them, and then we made a proposal to you about how they planned on advertising our unit and came up with this wonderful advertising campaign where we have posters in bars and restaurants and stores throughout the borough telling them that there is help for them. We did 2 public service announcements using Gabourey Sidibe, who's a very popular actress from Precious, and Sarah Jessica Parker, who is also a popular actress.
And as a result of this, how many cases were generated?
We have probably now close to 50 cases, and each one of them, we're proud to say that the defendants are, high bail has been set by the judges. They're in jail. We've gotten very high sentences, and most of the allegations that we have prosecuted, and I shouldn't say most, all have resulted in significant jail time for the defendants.
Now, you've heard me say that one of the problems with sex trafficking is probably as difficult as it is to generate political corruption and judicial corruption investigations.
Yes, I have heard you say that.
And so you had a lot of experience in that area. Why don't you tell us, how that began and what were some of the results?
Well, what turned out to be a 5 to 7 year investigation that I was at the center of started with a telephone call from an attorney to you, quite frankly, and he said that he had a client who had been approached by a judge to give him money in return for signing a document which the judge, by law, had to sign. And we started an investigation. We wired the attorney up, sent him in to speak to the judge, and he brought money in and he turned the money over.
And the judge initially demanded $250,000.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
And ultimately settled for $125,000.
Yes.
Okay.
He was bargained down by the attorney.
That was Judge Victor Barron.
That's correct, Victor
Barron. And because I handled that case, and it was a plea, and he got a 3 to 9 year sentence.
That's correct.
Right.
The first
that led to what?
Yes, it led to the following. It led to the date of sentence when you were in the courtroom sentencing and stood up for the district attorney's office representing the people. A woman was watching television that night and saw it on the news. She was in the midst of a custody battle with her husband in front of a judge by the name of Jerry Garson. She had the feeling that the case was going very poorly for her, and it was going poorly for her, and she had been involved with in terms of another individual, another litigant in the courtroom who told her that he knew Judge Garson and he knew that her husband had paid the judge off. And she had taken that allegation to the Attorney General's office, where it was met with just basically deaf ears. She had taken it to the FBI. They weren't interested. She had taken it to the U.S. Attorney's office. And then she saw you standing up in court and realized that our office was a place where she could come and we would take this seriously. And we did. Her name was Frida Hanemoff, and we started an investigation with her. It turns out that her husband had not paid Judge Garson off, but what we did find was that there were other people and there was an attorney who was involved with Judge Garson, who in fact was paying the judge off so that his clients would get favorable treatment in the courtroom. That started an investigation which then led us to an arrest of Judge Garson and the attorney and others who were involved in paying the judge off, which then led to another investigation involving the then county leader and
Clarence Norman Jr.
Yes.
And so that investigation, which you say ran between 5 and 7 years,
Yes, it did.
it produced the indictment, conviction, and imprisonment of Assemblyman Clarence Norman Jr., the Democratic county leader at the time.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Diane Gordon.
Yes.
Gerald Garson, who went to jail. Michael Garson, who pled guilty to a felony.
Also a Supreme Court judge, yes.
Supreme Court judge. And of course, Victor Barron. Now, you've been around for a very, very long time.
Yes.
Has any office ever come close to that number of public officials who've been prosecuted and imprisoned?
No. The very simple answer, no.
And since you had this extensive investigation into a wide range of allegations, I take it there were many allegations
There were.
that turned out to be totally false. Do you have an opinion as to the level of the integrity of the judiciary in Brooklyn?
It's superb. I mean, it's at the highest level, yes. You hit it right on the head. Once the investigation started, we were inundated by complaints about judges. And we investigated every single one of them. I personally looked at every single one of them. And what you have ticked off in terms of the results of the investigation is what we found, nothing more.
Right.
So.
And why are they so difficult? Well, why is it analogous to the difficulty you have with sex trafficking victims?
Well, oftentimes the victims are people like this lawyer.
Yeah.
And if a lawyer is going to appear before a judge, he certainly is not he's very reticent about coming forward and giving up information about the judge because he feels, in my opinion, and I think that this has been confirmed by talking to them, that if they give up one judge, another judge is also going to kind of look at them with some, askance, so to speak.
I think I'll always remember the conversation you and I had when you said that you had interviewed the lawyer and he was outraged that he was being shaken down at the level of $250,000 and ultimately $125,000. I remember you saying, if it was $25,000, we probably wouldn't have heard about this case.
That's exactly
Remember?
right. Exactly
right. And of course, that was sort of prophetic because 2 years later, that same lawyer got arrested for looting his partner's estate.
Exactly.
And he went to prison.
Exactly.
Okay,
yes.
So it's a good thing that Judge Barron asked for a lot of money.
Yes, he did. That is very good.
And so let's talk about the most recent activity in the Rackets division. That was the Untaxed cigarettes investigation. And why don't you give the viewers a background of the problem, the extent of it, and what kind of things that we do in the Rackets division to try and investigate and prosecute people who are involved in untaxed cigarettes.
Okay. Well, as you know, the problem with untaxed cigarettes in Brooklyn alone is enormous. What happens is bootleggers bring cigarettes up from the South or purchase cigarettes from others who bring them up from the South, untaxed, and sell them to retailers throughout the borough. Now, what that does is it deprives the citizens of the state, as we have estimated, of about $500 million a year in tax revenue.
In fact, the City Department of Finance says that it's likely that half the cigarettes sold in New York City are untaxed.
That's correct.
And that yields the $500 million a year.
Yes, and that's what we lose as taxpayers and as citizens of the city. The money from cigarettes, the tax money from cigarettes, goes to the programs that clearly are for stop smoking. They go to cancer research, goes to AIDS, those that can't afford AIDS medication. The money is earmarked for that, and that's all by state law. So if there's $500 million that doesn't come into the coffers of the state, then those programs suffer, and as a result, people suffer. We had several informants come to us and tell us about their ability to bring together our office posing as bootleggers and people who would bring the cigarettes in from the South, and individuals who were then looking to purchase them, who would then in turn resell them to retailers at the local level. We started out with one investigation, and that then mushroomed into an investigation that resulted in 23 defendants being arrested, with us recovering about $800,000 in cash in terms of our purchases. The cigarettes that we sold, 550 cases of cigarettes, and there are 60 cartons of cigarette packs in a case. So we sold 550 of those. And
where did you get the cigarettes?
We had a partnership with Philip Morris. Philip Morris has a group called Altria. And Altria is in the business of assisting law enforcement in these types of investigations. And they provided the cigarettes to us at very, very low cost. And then we would then sell them to the individuals who were the second in the tier. We were the first people in the tier, then they would be the middlemen, and then they would sell to the retailers. And we've got the cigarettes from them and sold it to them. And then obviously every time we did that, we would keep track of who it was that we sold to, and then made a big roundup just the other day in terms of the 23 defendants that we arrested.
Is it likely, because of the information you developed in this investigation, that you can identify other people who purchase cigarettes from you?
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt.
Without a
And
doubt.
that's ongoing.
Without a doubt.
And of the 23 people who were arrested, I don't recall anyone being identified as an organized crime person.
That's correct.
Did that surprise you?
It didn't surprise me, only because our informants were not of that ilk. It would not surprise me in the least, and in fact, we have had some information that organized crime is into this business. It's too lucrative for them to not be in it, and we're developing now investigations that we can take into that area as well.
What do you say to someone who says, look, I enjoy smoking, and I'm probably addicted to smoking, but I mean the cost of a package of cigarettes, because of all of these damn taxes, is, I believe, intrusive. So what's the big deal about my trying to get a carton of cigarettes at a reasonable price?
Well, aside from the obvious, which is the loss of tax revenue, and I know maybe these people don't care about the tax revenue, but if their family members were individuals who would benefit by what that tax revenue goes for, I think they would care. But more importantly, they don't know what they're actually smoking, because we have also uncovered, as part of the investigation, counterfeit cigarettes, which are not made in any under any scrutiny by any organization like Philip Morris or P. Laurelod. They're made in back rooms with God knows what in the tobacco. In fact, we had information that most of the cigarettes are or the tobacco comes from China, and in China, what they do to dry the tobacco, as opposed to hanging it the way it's done here, they drive trucks and vehicles over the tobacco leaves and use the exhaust of those trucks to dry the tobacco. So if you have leaded gasoline, obviously the fumes are going to be absorbed by the tobacco leaves, and now those things become part of a cigarette. And you can't tell the difference between a pack of cigarettes that it's counterfeit and a legitimate pack of cigarettes. In fact, one of the things that we also found during the investigation is that there are many bogus and counterfeit tax stamps out there. And the tax stamps, particularly the Virginia tax stamps, which are very valuable because they appear to give the package or the pack of cigarettes legitimacy. And if that appears on there, even though it may be bogus, then it can be sold to an unwitting consumer, and God knows what's getting into his lungs aside from the other dangers of tobacco.
So this, in every sense, is the tip of the iceberg.
Absolutely.
Now,
Absolutely.
are you working with folks from the state tax and finance? I assume they have a unit that investigates untaxed cigarettes.
They do, and we work to them to the extent that they are interested in working with us. And we've noticed over the last, several months and last year that they have kind of taken themselves out of this enforcement area.
Is it a budget problem for them?
You know what, boss? I don't exactly know why. I'm not really sure. Yeah. We've heard many different things.
But in this case, you work with a unit from the Alcohol Tax and Firearms and Explosives. That's ATF. ATF. A unit out of Virginia.
Yes.
How'd that happen?
Well, they were involved in an investigation in Virginia, and part of the investigation were people coming into Brooklyn, and they realized that they needed to get a local prosecutor to get involved with that part of the investigation. And they approached us, and we then became partners with them And it worked out very, very well. We worked with them as well as the Shenandoah County Sheriff's Office down in Virginia.
And what was their contribution?
They provided manpower to us, and also intelligence down in Virginia, and also when the start of the trip of those cigarettes started in Virginia. So they assisted us down there, and then ATF provided an undercover agent who actually did the operation here in Brooklyn with our detective investigators.
If you had one single piece of advice for how you stop the sale of untaxed cigarettes, what would you give a viewer?
I would, to stop the sale of untaxed cigarettes?
Yeah.
Well, obviously, the best way would be to stop smoking and maybe take advantage of the programs that the tax money has set up to help you stop smoking. That's what I would tell them.
But how can you convince them that they are, aside from you mentioned the help that maybe family members get, how would you convince them that what they're engaging in has an enormous impact, negative impact on the economy of this city and state?
Well, every time that a system or a program is cut in this city or in this state because of budgetary problems, something that may very well be as important as a Head Start program or something for children or an after-school program. Well, tax money is being lost by them purchasing untaxed cigarettes, and those programs that they are using and that are important to this city and state are being cut because we don't have the tax revenue, and that's what I believe that they should understand and realize.
And you mentioned that your suspicion is that organized crime is certainly into this kind of operation.
Yes.
And is it fair to say that you have already identified areas that you're going to pursue investigatively?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And would you be working with other federal agencies as well?
Well, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms seems to be the one federal agency that is interested in assisting us, and so we'll be working with them. And we do a lot of work with the Secret Service as well, and there are aspects of investigations that takes us into partnership with the Secret Service. So they have been a very, very big help to us in other areas, and I suspect that they will be in this one as well.
So this is an area that can be ongoing and can be very, very fertile for the Rackets division.
Yes, it can. Yes, it can.
And I think it's about all the time we have. Thank you again, Michael, for joining us. I'm District Attorney Charles Hynes. You can contact my office at 718-250-2300. Thank you for watching Brooklyn Elected Officials on BCAT Television Network.
Watch this and other Brooklyn Independent Television episodes online at brickartsmedia.org/BIT.